In terms of population density, if I was to say the word India, what pops into your head? For me, I imagine this. Absolute chaos. Thousands, millions, and even tens of millions of people crammed into cities, all competing against one another during the mad rush hour dash. People, cows, motorbikes, and tuk-tuks all whizzing past each other, honking their horns 24 hours a day. If, again, in terms of population density, I was to say the words the Netherlands, what would you imagine now? For me, the first thing that pops into my head is this type of view. Sparse grass fields with canals and windmills, with a few people cycling through neat paths. Well, what if I was to tell you that these two countries have almost identical population densities? At around 435 people per kilometre squared, India ranks as the 19th most densely populated country on Earth. The Netherlands, on the other hand, has a density of around 424, ranking them in 20th place. Of course, the monumental difference is that India has a population some 82 times greater than the Netherlands. India's size is around 78 times larger than the Netherlands, that's 3.3 million kilometers squared versus 41,000. What's kind of crazy, however, is that although India is astronomically larger in terms of size and population, its economy size is only 3.3 times larger, showing just how weak the Indian economy currently is compared to the Dutch's. Monaco is the most densely populated country on Earth, with some 18,000 people per kilometer squared. The country, or microstate as it's known, is rather unique in terms of how rich yet small it is. The country stretches a distance of just 2 kilometers squared, making it the smallest UN recognized country on Earth. Only Vatican City, which is an observer state, is smaller. Monaco's total population is around 36,000, meaning 36,000 people live in an area 1.7 times smaller than New York City's Central Park. However, there is a dependency on Earth that is actually more densely populated. Can you guess where? I'll give you a clue. It's classed as a special administrative region, and it's not Hong Kong. It is the other one, Macau. Macau is found slightly west of Hong Kong and Shenzhen, and at around 21,000 people per kilometer squared, it is the most densely populated country, or dependency, on Earth. For reference, the entire country of China, which is home to around 1.4 billion people, has a population density of around 150 people per kilometers squared, some 140 times less densely populated than Macau. But Monaco and Macau have absolutely nothing on a place which is thought to have been the most densely populated place in all of human history. It's actually in a place we just mentioned, Hong Kong. Kowloon Walled City was a walled city within the boundaries of what was at the time British Hong Kong. Around 50,000 people lived within this walled city, giving it an unbelievable population density of around 1.8 million people per kilometer squared. The walled city was, well, to put it nicely, hell on earth. It was rife with gambling, drugs, prostitution, and banned products such as dog meat. Canada and Iceland are vastly different in terms of their size. Canada is the second largest country on the planet, stretching some nearly 10 million kilometers squared. Iceland, on the other hand, ranks 106th in the world at just over 100,000 kilometers squared. However, something that these countries do have in common is their extreme sparse population densities. Both Canada and Iceland have population densities of just 4 people per kilometers squared. One big difference in their population densities is that Canada's population is spread out over several urban areas, particularly in the southern parts of the country with cities like Toronto, Vancouver and Montreal. This makes complete sense as the country is so large and the climate is more favourable in the south as opposed to the Arctic North. Iceland, on the other hand, finds the majority of its population in just one city, the capital Reykjavik, where its metro population is said to be home to around 2/3 of the country's total population. Two countries which share the same beginning 3 letters as well as a similar population density are Malta and the Maldives. The Maldives is actually slightly more densely populated at 1,750 people per kilometre squared, compared to Malta's 1,700. These figures place the countries as the 4th and 5th most densely populated countries on Earth. What's rather interesting is that their population and sizes are roughly the same too. Even though these two countries are of similar sizes, they are very different in terms of their shape. Malta comprises of just 5 islands compared to the Maldives' 1,200 or so. Malta's capital, Valletta, is the most densely populated part of the country, with some 6,000 or so people per kilometre squared. However, this is nothing compared to Male, the capital of the Maldives, whose population density is around 21,000 people per kilometre squared. If Male was its own country, it would rank as the most densely populated country on Earth, ever so slightly more dense than Macau as mentioned earlier. I'm not sure about you, but when I think of the US, I immediately think of big bustling cities like New York City, Chicago, LA and Miami, which are all heavily populated. However, as a whole, the US is actually a rather sparsely populated country, ranking 148th in the world, with a density of just 35 people per kilometre squared. Having a population of around 335 million, the US does have many highly populated urban areas. And some regions are quite densely populated, such as in the northeastern and southeastern states. However, the region known as the Midwest and the state of Alaska are very sparsely populated. Alaska, for example, has a density of just 0.5 people per kilometre squared. This brings the country's population density down significantly. A country which shares an almost identical population density is a country which I instantly associate with being a sparsely populated country, Kyrgyzstan. When I think of this country, I think of huge, open, vast landscapes with very few people. The country is found in Central Asia and has a population density of around 34 people per kilometre squared, so ever so slightly more sparsely populated than the US. The DR Congo just misses out on the top 10 largest countries on the planet, ranking 11th. At 2.3 million kilometers squared, it falls ever so short of being the largest country on the African continent too, as this accolade belongs to Algeria, which is just 40,000 kilometers squared larger. At around 102 million, the DR Congo is around the 16th most populated country on Earth. However, this large population still does not make it the most populated in Africa, and in fact not even in the top 3. Egypt, Ethiopia and Nigeria all have more people. So this gigantic country found in Central Africa has a population density of around 44 people per kilometers squared. This is about the same density as the UK overseas territory of St Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha. The latter is known around the world for being the most remote inhabited island on Earth. What's kind of crazy about the DR Congo is that its capital city, Kinshasa, is some 600 times more densely populated than the rest of the country. Its population density is around 29,000 people per kilometer squared, living within its urban area. The population of the capital is around 16 million and rising fast. This number is projected to double by the 2040s. Both the Nordic region and Central Asian stans consist of 5 countries, being Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland and Iceland in the Nordics, and Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan being the Central Asian stan countries. But which region has the higher population density? They both have relatively small populations for their land area. Well, the Nordic region covers a distance of some 1.2 million kilometers squared, whereas the Central Asian stan countries cover a distance of some 4 million kilometers squared. They have populations of 27 and 79 million respectively. This therefore means that both of these regions actually have very similar population densities, with the Nordic region being ever so slightly more densely populated, at around 22 people per kilometer squared compared to 20 in the stans. Out of all of the 10 countries across these two regions, Denmark is by far the most densely populated, at 136 people per kilometer squared. The least densely populated country would be Iceland, at just 4 people per kilometer squared, one of the lowest on Earth. North Macedonia, the French territory of Wallis and Futuna, Serbia and Myanmar all share the same population density, with 81 people per kilometers squared. Now, I believe this is the most or equal most amount of countries and or regions that share the same population density. Out of these 4 places, Myanmar is easily the largest. Its population is around 55 million in a country that is 677,000 kilometers squared. For me, Myanmar is quite a mysterious country. Even though it has a relatively high population and is quite a large country, it is completely overshadowed by its southeastern neighbours. Wallis and Futuna, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. It's a tiny overseas territory of the French, found in the Pacific northeast of Fiji. The territory is comprised of 3 main islands where around 11,000 people call home. Coincidentally, North Macedonia actually borders Serbia to its north. The former is some 3.6 times smaller than the latter in terms of population and size. At 3, 0.3 and 0.03 people per kilometers squared, Namibia, the Falkland Islands and Greenland are 10 times less densely populated than their former counterpart. It's kind of crazy that Namibia is one of the least densely populated countries on Earth, in fact the second least, only behind Mongolia, yet it is 10 times more densely populated than the Falkland Islands and 100 times more densely populated than Greenland. So there we have it, some interesting population densities from countries and regions across the world. If you can think of any other good examples, please do let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching.